Thank you. Good evening and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight and taking the time out of your busy schedules to be here. My name is Alicia. I'm one of the volunteers for the Bundy campaign. For those of you who are not familiar with who Ammon Bundy is, I hope that by the end of the night you will have a better idea of what he stands for. For those of you who've only heard of him from the corrupt media or government exploits, I'm here to share with you that he is nothing like that at all. In the last years, I've come to know him as a very gentle man who values traditional family and liberty. A man of principle and integrity. As many of you may be aware, that the media has done everything possible to tarnish his name and discredit his accountability. For that reason, he needs your support. The censorship he has experienced is great and has vastly reduced his ability to spread information vital to the people of Idaho. He needs the support of the people to get his message out and receive assistance in promoting his name for governor. He has 3 ready-made commercials to go out on the air over the radio, some that are already playing, but needs your help to continue the ability to spread truth. With that, I bring your attention over to the swag table in the back of the room, where items can be purchased and donations made in support of his campaign. Please be sure to see his campaign manager, Wendy, before you leave tonight. We are also in need of volunteers in your local area, so if it's on your heart, please inquire with Wendy. I do hope by the end of the night that you will see what I see. A grassroots constitutionalist. A man whom I call friend. One who will stand firm to protect your inalienable rights, the Constitution, and work diligently to restore the beautiful gem state of Idaho. Without further ado, I would like to announce to the front of the room, Mr. Ammon Bundy.
All right, so we got to get comfortable because we're going to be here for a little bit. So is everybody comfortable? Feeling okay? Stand there for a little bit. Maybe we'll have to play musical chairs if someone starts to not ready to fall over, and I'll try not to be too boring. But thank you for being here. This is a great group. Thank you, Alicia, for organizing this. Awesome. Alicia is my friend. I have many friends, and I'm very grateful for the friends that I have. So, she mentioned a little bit about I think it's actually kind of a fun challenge, but we have a challenge because we live in a world where if you speak truth, then what happens to you? You get cut off of your platform, and we pretty much communicate through social media these days when it comes to trying to convey a message. And so we have an interesting situation where if we have a message that needs to go out, we know it's true, and if those that are facilitating that message going out do not like your message because of politics, then they won't send the message out. And not only that, they can even cancel you and so forth. So it is an issue. However, there are some things that we have in play that are actually an advantage to us. And that is, as an official candidate for what's called a C1, I end up having to file with Secretary of State, right? That I'm an official candidate. And that actually gives my message certain protections where they can't just be censored. And so we plan on using that to get messages out that normally would get shut down. And that's what we're doing. I don't know if anybody in here have heard some of the radio ads. Raise your hand if you've heard some of the radio. So very few of you, so we need to keep doing more. We've been running about the last 2.5 to 3 weeks. And if I had our speaker, I don't know, we didn't get it set up in time, and we don't have a little extension cord. It doesn't look like there's a plug-in up here anywhere close, so we decided just to talk.
We got one right back here.
Is there one there?
Yep.
Maybe we could, there's one in the corner, John, you wanna try to get it? The reason why is it would be fun to share some of these other, radio ads that we're getting ready to run. And they would be normal ads that would be shut down. They wouldn't run, but they have to run them because I'm an official candidate. And so, because of that, we have an opportunity to say things and to spread truth that normally we wouldn't be able to do. But there's always an issue with running ads, and that is it costs a lot. It costs a lot to run ads, it costs a lot to create them, and then to get them out. So we're asking people to donate, to contribute to the campaign for that reason and all the other reasons that we need contributions for a campaign, but so we can continue to spread the message. Now I'm going to go into a few other things that maybe will back that up and help motivate you even more to see why we need to act now. Let's just leave it at that. But I want to give you a little bit of background about myself. Because ultimately, what am I here for? I'm here trying to build confidence in you that I'm the one that you should put your trust in to run the state of Idaho as governor. And so that's what I'm here for, right? That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, and hopefully that's why you're here, is to listen to me and see, well, yeah, I think he might be the one we should get behind. And so I want you to know who I am. I grew up in southern Nevada on a ranch. Anybody been to Mesquite, Nevada? Been through it? I-15 runs through it. If you're going to Vegas, and it's right before you climb that big mesa, Mesquite. That's called the Virgin Valley, and there's a river runs through it called the Virgin River. And my family lives about 20 miles south of Mesquite. I grew up on a ranch there. It's still there. My dad grew up, or I grew up in the same home that my dad grew up. My grandfather built it in 1946. And so that's how I grew up. It's a very dry.
Test 1, 2.
There you go, look at that. Okay, is that any better? Okay, so my dad, I grew up in southern Nevada, and my family has been ranching there since 1877. So now 40 something years. And when my family came into that valley, no one had lived there. There was a group that tried to go in there about 10 years prior, and they went back to Salt Lake and reported that it was uninhabitable. And then my family ended up going in there, and they stuck with it. They began to find springs on the mountains. They began to capture that water and to be able to water the cattle. They began to divert the water from the Virgin River and level fields. And ultimately, they built a beautiful valley that was full of agriculture and cattle, and that was truly thriving and producing a commodity for the American people. And that's my family. And so that's who I am. My mother is actually from Gooding, Idaho, so I do have Idaho roots. And I grew up, and I love the way I grew up. I felt free. I was able to travel. We spent a ton of time on horses or on ATVs or bouncing in the back of a pickup truck, and we were constantly working on the ranch. And to kind of give you an idea, our ranch, because it takes 100 acres to produce enough feed for one cow. 100 acres. Because it's just dry desert. And they'll eat the shrub, they'll eat, if there's grass, they'll eat some of the little grass, but there's not always grass there. In fact, we always tease it. Whenever everybody else thinks we're in a drought, we just don't know the difference. And neither do our cattle. And anyhow, so we ranch on a huge area, because my dad runs about 600 to 700 head of cattle. And so, like, it's not unusual to go to the bottom of the ranch and back up, and you've gone over 80 miles just to cover the area. That's just the road down, the road back. So we spent a ton of time growing up. We would spend days on horseback, just to find cattle. It was almost like, like you'd be hunting here, and then we'd find them, and then we would, either trap them or push them into corrals, or we would just flat out rope them and brand them. And that's how I grew up, and I enjoyed that life. And then when I was kind of getting to the idea where I have to figure out what I'm going to do on my own, my dad came to me and he said, basically, this ranch isn't big enough for the both of us. But he didn't mean it in a negative way. It was the reality that the ranch was not going to produce enough to provide for all his children. It just wasn't. So many of us were going to have to go out and go make another living somewhere else. And then, to me, that was like, that's not what I wanted to do. Even when I went out and began to start my business, and I moved to Arizona, and I was actually doing quite well. All I wanted to do is go back and go to the ranch and live on the ranch and have the life that I had, and have my children have that life as well. But it just wasn't feasible. It wasn't feasible because it's a hard living, and it can only produce enough for about 2 families. And so, me being in the middle of the pack, I had to go find another living. And I did. I left the ranch with a great asset that I'm always grateful for, and that was that my father taught us how to work. And we worked hard. It was not unusual at 8, 9, 10 years old to have worked 10, 12, 14 hours and do it day after day after day, especially in the summer when we weren't going to school. In fact, I'll give you a little bit of an interesting detail that I haven't given anybody else, so you guys are the first because I hadn't thought about it. My oldest sister, she's now 50, I think she's 51. Well, my dad, when she turned 10 years old, my dad gave her a little certificate. And I remember it was a certificate that said that she could be retired from milking the cows. That she never had to milk the cows ever again. And you know why? Because she had milked cows for 5 years. Wow. Right? So she was 5 years old when she was full milking the cows. And when she was 10, he says you no longer have to do it. And the reason why is because now we were getting old enough we could do it, right? But that's a real story. And that's how he grew up. And I'm grateful for that because I was able to take that work ethic and go into the workforce, into building a business. And that's what I did. I started multiple businesses when I was in high school. I ended up using the high school shop, and we had all this really amazing welding equipment and so forth. And on the ranch, I learned how to weld. So I started a little business where I was making horse panels and selling them. And then I graduated and went to a little bit of school and started a fleet maintenance business where I managed to maintain commercial trucks. And I run that business for 21 years. And that ended up being one of the largest private fleet maintenance companies in Arizona. And I had, I've hired hundreds of employees. I dealt with millions and millions of dollars a year. And it was a very detailed, complicated business because we had to manage all the maintenance, track all the maintenance on every system of the truck. We had to collect that information. Plus, I had a full service shop where we did everything from liftgate repairs to rebuilding these large diesel engines to transmissions, and ended up being basically the full service that anybody who might have a commercial fleet would need. And built that up. And throughout the whole time I had that business, I was always looking for software to help me manage the maintenance, tracking, and all the shop processes and paperwork and the technicians, diagnostics, and communicating with the customer and all that. And I couldn't find it. I'd find pieces and I'd put them together, but I had a really great system that we developed over, almost 2 decades. And so I decided that I was going to build my own software. And I hired a programmer, I hired a project manager, and then over about a 4-year period, we developed a fleet management shop management software. And we developed to the point, because it was kind of a perfect storm, because I was able to work with my vendors, work with my customers, work with my technicians, work with my office staff, and get this software to where it was just perfectly working and firing on all levels. And then I began to, it was so good and it helped us so much, I began to sell it to other shops. And then we began to sell it more and more until now it's one of the #1 fleet maintenance shop management softwares in North America. And so that's kind of my background. I came from the ranch. I probably, I grew up when I was younger, without shoes. I just hardly ever wore shoes. None of my brothers and sisters wore shoes. And then when it came time, I took the asset of being able to learn how to work and applied it. And then I was able to do certain things with it that I felt was beneficial to, Arizona, for providing a great service to them, but also I was able to influence the entire industry by creating these standards and capturing them and then having them duplicated through a software that now many shops across North America use our same processes that we have that we used and developed in my shop. And so that's my background. And we could talk about that a little further. I do want to, since I've told you this story, want you to understand that the media wants you to believe, or people to believe, that I'm a divider, that I'm a disruptor. Well, I'm here to tell you that you cannot build 2 multi-million-dollar businesses from scratch with hundreds of employees, dealing with millions of dollars, doing very complicated things, including communicating with many different parties and bringing that all together, and make actually something valuable of it so others can use it. You can't do that being a divider and to being a disruptor. You cannot. And so I ask you to consider that when you're considering who you should support as governor. Now, I hope to hear soon, we just have a conversation. I want to answer your questions. I want to answer your hard questions. And I'm willing to take any question that you have, except ones that are personal between my wife and I. That's the only ones I exclude. I leave that as a kind of a disclaimer there. But so far, nobody's asked any of those questions, except last night someone asked, well, have you ever compromised with your wife? And I basically had to say, well, I'm still married. Right? So, good question though. You may know or understand a little bit about what happened to my father and his ranch in 2014. Ultimately, after, like I said, 140 something years, I think it was close to 140 years in 2014, my family being there again since 1877, 5 generations, I'd be the 5th generation. And then pretty much, to put it in a very small nutshell, the federal government comes along and says, well, it's ours, not yours. And my dad's like, what do you mean it's yours? And it's not yours, it's mine. It's, here are the deeds, here with the state of Nevada. It's been in my family. We've never stopped using it since we moved into this area. And it's clearly ours, and you're not going to take it. And they said, well, we're going to take it anyway. And my dad said, no, you're not. And that's basically, there was a legal battle that ensued. Of course, it's in the federal courts. My dad, I love the way he explains the federal courts. He says, going into the federal courts with the federal prosecutors, the federal judges, all the federal money and federal rules and regulation. He goes, it's like a man comes into your home and beats up your wife and children. So you take the man to court to get some justice, and they say, all arise for the honorable judge, and in walks a man in a black robe, and it's the very man that beat up your wife and children. That's what it's like going into a federal court trying to defend yourself, especially as a little family, and you're fighting against the most powerful legal team ever created in even close to there's nothing been even close in history than what the U.S. Attorney's Office has created. There's over 7,500 attorneys, and each one of them have their own staff and their own offices and their own, it's a massive. And so to think of a little ranching family who's, for the most part, just making it year to year to fight against such a monster is just not a fair fight. So ultimately what happened is they decided that they were going to take it anyway. Even though we had the deeds, we've been running cattle on that area for 140 years. They decided they were going to take it. So they sent 213 armed federal agents, surrounded our family's home, put snipers on the hills. They locked down the ranch with armed guards at each point going into the ranch. With helicopters, they began to shoot the cattle from the air, just putting them in mass graves, dumping them in mass graves, leaving the baby cattle out in the desert to die. And then they began to destroy our water infrastructure that had been in there for over 100 years. Began to actually tear it out with backhoes and with dump trucks. And so we began to, the best we could, kind of protest against them. We began to film them and what they were doing. And at one point, a liaison from the Bureau of Land Management, because there's 5 federal agencies there, a liaison said that if we resisted in any way, that they would kill us. And then later they said, this could be another Waco or Ruby Ridge. And at the time, we didn't fully understand, but we understand more now, because the same team, the FBI HRT team, the same team that went into Waco, the same team went into Ruby Ridge, the same team that went into Malheur and killed Leroy Finicum, was the same team heading the operation at the Bundy Ranch. And so we have every reason to believe that they were serious when they said that they will kill you. And when it was interesting, because the Bureau of Land Management liaison said they will kill you, and we're like, well, who's they? It should be we. He was talking about the FBI HRT team, and he knew how serious they were, and so he was seriously warning us. But something amazing happened, something that changed me forever, and actually put me right here where I'm at now. Put me on a path that made it so I felt like I had to act. And that was, we began to expose what they were doing, killing cattle. They began to tase us, throw us to the ground. They began to sick dogs on us. They began to do all these things to us. And we filmed it and sent it out to the American people, and people from all over the country started coming to the ranch. They were concerned that another Waco or Ruby Ridge was going to happen. And thousands of people came to the ranch from all over the country, including Hawaii and Alaska. And ultimately, it turned everything right side up. And all of a sudden now, we are now the ones being protected. And these rogue federal agents, now they're the one they went back to their military type base and began to try to figure out what they're going to do. Now they just literally awoke the people, and it was like hitting a hornet's nest. And now you got all these hornets just swarming around, right? And they were just people just like you, but they weren't going to allow these people to kill our family and to take our property away. And so they gave them an ultimatum. They said, you give back the cattle, because at this time they had collected about 400 head. They killed about 60 head of cattle. And they gave them an ultimatum basically to leave the area and not come back. And these federal agents accepted that term and left the area in 107 vehicles. And I watched them. I've got video of 107 vehicles leaving, one right after another. It took them almost a half an hour just driving onto the freeway, one right after when they left. And the people went back up in there. There was cowboys there that went up into the corrals, got the cattle back, and put them back on the range. Yes. And when I saw that, and it took me, some little bit to get used to understand, but I began to understand truly how rights are preserved, how they're maintained. And they're not maintained. We've been duped into believing that our rights are maintained in the courtroom, or that they're maintained in the ballot box. There's certain purposes for the courts and the ballot boxes, but that is not where our rights are maintained. Certain people want us to believe that our rights are maintained in the ballot box, so then we think we got to put all our energy, everything we have, our energy into getting the right person so that we can go to the ballot box and protect our rights. Or that we got to get all our money together and get an attorney so that we can make sure that we have a good attorney fighting for us in the courts. And I want to ask you, whether you're a historian or not, where in history do you ever find where there's a violation of rights going on, human rights, when there's a power coming down upon individuals, taking their rights away? Where has it ever been resolved? In the court or in the ballot box? Right? Where? Has it ever been resolved? Or has it been resolved by people standing and saying no? Coming around each other saying no. How have rights been preserved in history? They haven't been preserved in the ballot box or in the courts. They haven't been. Even let's go all the way let's go back to the civil rights movements. Let's look at that. What happened there? Very interesting thing happened there. Because we have the Declaration of Independence that says what about a people? What does it say? Who said that? What did you say?
Inalienable rights.
Yeah, inalienable rights. It says that we hold, I'm trying to get right there. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Right? That was our founding document, our Declaration of Independence. Yet, we went into the agreement of our country, and not all people were created equal, right? Or treated equal. They were created equal, but they weren't treated equal. So then we come 100 years later, we have a civil war, which is about several different things, don't get me wrong, but one of them was about slavery. We have a civil war, the Union won, and the 14th Amendment was ratified or put into place. And it basically made it legal or illegal to treat someone legally different, right? But so now we're talking about the 1860s, right? Or around something around 1860s, right around that time. So now what are we doing 100 years later in the 1960s? People still can't sit in the front of the bus, go to the public bathrooms, do what we're doing here now. There's still a certain type of people, but I thought we had answered that. We said this 200 years prior, that all people were equal, right? And we fought a bloody civil war and made it illegal to treat people differently. But yet 100 years later, they're still having to fight to just sit on the front of the bus, or to go in a public bathroom, or go to schools. Why didn't all that work? Why didn't our Declaration of Independence work? Why didn't the Civil War and the 14th Amendment work? Why didn't it work? And then what did work? I think that's a better question. What did work? What's that?
We the people stood up.
Yeah, Rosa Parks decided, no, guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to sit in front of the bus. And I'm going to sit here. And she got arrested for it. And they kept sitting in front of the bus. They kept going to public bathrooms. They kept going to schools. They had to assert their right by using it, by acting upon it. And then what happened shortly after? Then all the local courts and all the policies and all the regulations then began to afford them equal rights. But it proves that until you stand and act, until you actually assert your rights, that they will not be afforded you. And it was the courts and the ballot, the elections and all that followed the action, not led it. It followed it. It had to be the people saying, no, these are my rights. I will assert them. I will use them. And I will defend them. And then these other pieces of government got in line and began to finally function the way that the law had already established. So I'm about done here talking, except for questions, but I began to understand this very clear because of what happened at the ranch. And I could see that there was a tremendous amount of corruption that was going on, and that it was that what was happening was that our rights, individual rights, were being treated as if they were a privilege, such as your right to decide what you're going to put in your body, right? We're now fighting this. They think it's a privilege, I guess. They think, and a privilege means that it's somebody else's rights affording us that, right? But that's not the way it is. Our bodies were given us from God, and He gave us jurisdiction over that, and therefore we are the ones that make that decision. And never any time did we, the people, collectively give the government agents authority over our bodies. And I know personally, I've never given anybody else authority over my body. And so that's where we stand. So with that being said, maybe you understand me a little bit more than you did before you came into this room, who I am and why I'm here. But I want to open this up to questions. Don't be afraid to ask. I'm going to answer some. I'll answer quickly. Others I might take a little bit to try to explain my position. But you can ask any question you want, besides a personal question between my wife and I. So the floor is open. Right here.
So I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Oh.
Defund the police in support of BLM. You're up.
Okay, defund the police in support of BLM.
Well,
that's not a question.
Being with BLM and their protest against
defunding the police. Okay. So what was I doing there?
Well, the rumor out there
So what's the question?
The rumor out there is that you were going to be part of that protest, and they used it to tarnish your record. So
Okay.
I'd like you to tell people
Okay.
why you were doing it, and they didn't.
Excellent. So you heard that. Who's seen the headline that said that Ammon Bundy joined BLM? Anybody? Okay, that was our media that said that. And the reality of what happened is in 2020, I had organized the People's Rights. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's a network, and we build a software to communicate, and we have over 60,000 people in it. And basically it's a network so that if somebody is in need because their rights are being infringed upon, that all the local people around them can come in and protect the people, whether it's through phone calls, whether it's through having a camera, or just an open defense of that person if it was justified. And up in Coeur d'Alene, the Black Lives Matter was having some protest up there, and they were worried that they were going to do what they had done in other areas and ransack their businesses. So we activated the network and worked with the people up there and got a whole bunch of people to go downtown Coeur d'Alene and kind of patrol and keep the businesses from being damaged. And not one thing happened. And then we did the same thing here in Boise. We had people all over just making sure that it was a peaceful demonstration and not rioting and burning. And nothing happened. And then what happened is Black Lives Matter began to protest almost every week or multiple times a week down at the Capitol building. And they were doing this for several months. And so there was what I always say, quote unquote, patriots began to go down there and confront them and actually assault them and spit on them and do these things to the Black Lives Matter, right? And at this time, just so you know, never had Black Lives Matter at this time in Boise done anything to damage anything or to destroy businesses. You want me to?
Yeah.
We got a pizza here.
Jonathan? Nope, not our group.
No Jonathan, anywhere?
No Jonathan?
No. Free.
All right. So we're at the so we have these, again, quote unquote patriots going down and assaulting these Black Lives Matter people while they're protesting. So, and I've got this people's rights thing, and it's really becoming active, and we've got a Facebook page. And so one of them from the Black Lives Matter organization said, hey, if you're all about protecting people's rights, well, what about our right to demonstrate? What about our right to protest? And a couple people were managing that Facebook page for people's rights, and they ended up contacting me. And I said, well, find out if what they're saying is really happening. Is there really people going down and assaulting and spitting on them and doing those things? And so they did, and sure enough, that was happening. And I said, okay, well, let them know that this is what there was several communication back and forth. I said, let them know that what I'll do on their next protest, which was actually a defund the police protest, and it really didn't matter what the protest was, but I was going to go down and take a Justice for Lavoy Finicum sign with his picture on it, and Justice for Lavoy Finicum. And I was going to go down to the Capitol building, and I was going to see if anybody, and watch, and if anybody assaulted anybody being peaceful, I was going to go confront them. And so I told them, or I sent the message. I sent the message that that's what I would do. And ultimately, this Black Lives Matter guy contacted their leadership, and they contacted the national leadership, and I guess there was a big old confrontation inside the Black Lives Matter about this. And ultimately, they came back to me and said, well, if you're going to come, you got to comply to our rules, and that includes wearing a mask. And I said, well, I'm not going to comply to your rules, and I don't wear a mask. And they said, well, you're not invited then. And I said, fine, I don't want to go anyway. And that's how it ended. That was it. But the media says, because I did announce that I was going to do it, because I didn't want people to go down there and not understand why I was there. So I announced it, it became public. And then the media says, Ammon Bundy's going to join Black Lives Matter, and you got national media, like I was going to join that Marxist, really wicked organization that is destructive to black lives. And but I do believe, and I still believe, and I would still do it today. I would go down there still today and protect their right to peacefully protest. Because if I don't protect that right, then I'm setting a bad precedent for my own and for my other neighbors' rights. And that's just the way it is. We have to think outside our little comfort zones to see that it is important that we defend all rights when they're infringed upon, not just those people that we like.
Amen.
And so that's my long answer. But I'm glad you asked it to get it out of the way.
I got more.
Okay.
We'll let other people go.
Hey, another question here.
I got a question.
Okay, right here.
I'm Lucas, I'm from Caldwell. So this is a two-part question. The first part is, do you believe that there was interference in our presidential election in 2020? And if so, how does that affect your run? And what would you do if you got elected to address the election integrity issue here in Idaho?
Okay, great question, good concern. So I'm not a conspiratorial person. I'm not at all. But I do believe that there is enough evidence to convince me that there has certainly been some tampering with, in some places, fairly extreme, and in other places, not so much. And in Idaho, I just don't know. Okay? Now, I did talk to the Secretary of State's office, and they said everything's okay. So, just you know, everything's okay, right? So, now the second part of your question. I am not going to wait until after the election. I'm not. We are going to be very proactive, and what we are doing as we speak, we're putting together pretty much a threefold kind of system put into place to make sure that the elections integrity in Idaho are upheld. And I have to work within the power that I have. And one of the things that we will be doing is we are encouraging all our volunteers. We have several hundred volunteers already. We are encouraging them to go volunteer to be work at the polls. Okay, so that they are actually working at the polls, you know, representing the county, not representing the Bundy for Governor campaign, doing it properly in the way they should, and helping their county do that. Then we're asking also for those that aren't volunteering for the county, with the county, to go and actually watch the polling areas, watch the lines, watch the polling booths, and be aware of what's going on. We are creating, because I'm a software guy, we're creating part of our software, part of our campaign, where immediately anything that you might find can be reported through our software, so it comes to us. So if there's people using the same ID, if there's anything that it looks like maybe somebody has done something with ballots, if anything seems off, it can be immediately reported to us, and we're going to have a direct connection to the Secretary of State. We will have attorneys on hand during the elections, and so we're not going to wait until a month or 2 months and all of that, and then decide we're going to have an audit. It's just too late by then. We're going to hit it and attack it while it's happening. We're going to be calling the Secretary of State saying, look, I have these videos, I have this pictures, I have this report from this place with this volunteer, this is happening right now, you need to address this, right? And it will be officially documented as well. And then, if there's anything fishy or anything that, when it comes to the counting, because in Idaho, pretty much everybody, the way we understand it, most counties, you vote on paper, then they put it in a machine, it counts it. And then there's a process in which they take that those numbers, and then they publish it. Well, if there's any question, then we will request to count the paper ballots. And we'll have a team, that probably the same team or maybe others as well, that will be there ready immediately to count ballots as soon as they're available to us, right? But we're not waiting. We're not going to wait. We're going to push. Look, we need to count this county, this county, this county. We need to count these. And then finally, because I have the ability and the manpower and the knowledge to be able to understand and to work with codes, we will, if there is an issue and a question, we will demand that we have the code, that we can certify the machine, that we can certify the process, and actually have the manpower to be able to look at codes and understand what went in and what came out and what is happening. And so with those things, and pretty much we've kind of categorized those into 3 different efforts. We hope to secure the integrity of the vote here in Idaho. And we are not going to look back too much. I think that there's, especially here in Idaho, I think we have to look for the May 2020 primary elections and make sure that that election is an election of integrity and put these protocols in place. And so that is what we're working on right now. And I believe that it will set a message, say, look, if there is something going on or a plan to go on, we're not just gonna lay down and let it happen. And we have the ability and the manpower and the knowledge to stop it and to catch it. And so that's my, again, long answer. So, right here and then right here.
Camden County is keeping applications on file for a year for poll workers, and they had informed me that if a position comes open, they'll let me know, but at this time, they're already putting a team together.
Yeah. Well, it's a volunteer thing and you want to get in line, but we're also, if we can't get a volunteer because the county doesn't need you, then we will have them, and we plan on, credential, where you will be an official representative for the Ammon Bundy for Governor campaign with credentials as a poll watcher. And, and basically that's what we're doing. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Anita. I've been a nurse, this is a little background, I've been a nurse for 43 years, and will be fired by St. Al's probably by December when they are away from their emergency. My question is, the hospitals have to follow a protocol that was designed by Fauci using remdesivir, which basically just kills everybody who gets in ICU. What can we do to make it so that all the doctors that will give everybody who doesn't want the jab ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine without the pharmacies, badgering us and saying, no, you can't use this for that protocol?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take a jab at our current governor. Right, a jab at our current governor. Who knows when Governor Little, you may not even know that he did this, but made hydroxychloroquine restricted to be sold just in the normal method it was in Idaho. Who knows when he did that? March 13th, 2020. Now, I thought this was a novel coronavirus, right? I thought we didn't know anything about it. I thought, we weren't even having the dialogue about hydroxychloroquine until July of 2020. And here, clear from the very beginning, he made it illegal. Actually, I take that back. I think it was March 18th, because March 13th is when he said the order. It was March 18th, 2020. So think about that one, first of all. Now, to answer your question, why are they required to follow that protocol? Do you know the answer? Because they received federal funds and signed memorandums of understanding, MOUs. Now you had another thought. You want to share it with us?
Well, I think it's partly to do with the fact that it's under emergency use authorization because supposedly there is no treatment for COVID. So, yeah, so I think it's twofold because of the emergency use act.
It's pretty much the same thing to what you're saying, because why would a hospital in Idaho, a private, quote unquote, private hospital in Idaho, have to follow an emergency use policy from Washington, D.C.? Well, why? Well, the reason why is because they took federal money, and they've been taking it for a long time. And the federal government does not give money without strings attached to it. And those strings are called memorandums of understanding, MOUs, and they're very strict about the protocols that you have to follow. And these protocols that they agreed upon were, the different things that are coming from Fauci and so forth. and that many people are concerned about being the cause of so many deaths in the hospitals. And I think they have good concern to think that. So the problem is allowing the federal government to come down into our states, into our counties, into our cities, our schools, our hospitals, our health departments, and saying, well, we'll give you money if you agree to this contract, if you agree to this protocol. It is a huge problem, and it is the reason why our school boards are doing what they're doing, our health districts are doing what they're doing, our hospitals are doing what they're doing, and even our governor. It's the reason why. Because they have contractually agreed to do it in order to receive a tremendous amount of federal funds. And so the answer is, we have to stop the flow of that money coming the way it is.
That's right.
And it just has to be stopped. What in the world is our school districts doing contracting with the federal government in Washington, D.C.? Why are we allowing that to happen? We should not be allowing that to happen. And in fact, our founders knew that if the federal government could take money from the people and control its resources, and this is the way they said it, that it would put the states and the people into undue obedience. And that's exactly what's happening, right? It should not be a trickle-down control because they took the resources away from the people and dangled it in front of the people for obedience. That it should not be. And that battle needs to be fought. I can go into great detail of how I plan on doing it, but just for now, know that I am planning on fighting that battle. I understand the problem that it causes, and I understand that in order for Idaho to remain Idaho, and for us to be free as a people, we have to stop the flow of that coming down into the states. We just have to. So did you have a hand raised or no? Did someone know? Okay, then right here.
So I'm a mother of 4 kids,
Okay.
and it seems like our children are always sought after by the government in some way, shape, or form. That's really scary. And so and I know Governor Little changed the parental rights
Correct.
last year, I think.
Mhm.
So if our kids were to be taken into state custody, we no longer have a right to know where they are, to have visitation, or anything like that. And why did we do that? But what can you tell us, or how can you give us peace of mind as parents in the future if you become governor?
So, great question. And Governor Little did. So Governor Little did suspend, under executive authority, using his executive emergency order, he suspended around 127 legislative laws, and several of those laws are protecting parental rights when the state takes your child into custody, or a child into custody. Now, we studied this in great detail, we published it, but we can't fully understand why he would do such a thing. The only thing I could say, and if you want to have that information, just let me know or let Winnie know and we can send it to you, is that the only reason we can, is that it looks as if all the laws he suspended were those that were restricting, putting a whole bunch of children into one facility at a time. So for example, I'll give you some examples of, he suspended laws, Idaho laws, that made it so that the state had to communicate with the child, with the parents, and let them know where they're at, let them know different things about them, let them know different medical decisions that they have made. They also suspended the right for the parent to appeal the decisions of the state. But they also suspended things such as the ratio between an adult and a child, right? So there was a ratio where you had to have so many adults with so many children, right? They also suspended having to have so many bathrooms for so many children. they also suspended all the fire codes and all that you have to have on a facility that's holding children. And so, all of these things, including the amount of bathrooms for girls versus boys, and there's all these things that were suspended that made it appear as if they were planning in some fashion to a circumstance where they had to hold a bunch of children in the state custody. I don't know why, but that is a fact. And if you want, I can give you that information. And that's what our governor did. Now, to answer the question is, the state, again, has no jurisdiction over your children. They have usurped that power. And as a governor, I will make sure that I defend the rights of parents over their children. And it's just plain and simple. I can give you, again, a lot of details of how I intend on doing that. One is ending the emergency order that hasn't still been ended. Ending the emergency order and getting our government back into a Republican form of government. And as anybody I'm not talking about the Republican Party. The Constitution calls it a Republican form of government, which is a representative form of government with representatives that are basically overseeing all the efforts of the executive branch and so forth. So, hopefully that answers your question. Right? Actually, right behind you, because he had his hand up first, and then right here.
I got two questions.
Okay.
What's your stance on the Convention of States? And the other one is, I heard on radio, I don't know if it was, I can't remember what it was, but it was something with the Republican Party here in Idaho. They mentioned it was with Tom Luna, mentioned that they didn't want you in their party.
Correct.
And so I don't know how is that going to affect the primary or so forth, when as it was their input in power.
Good question. So, the Convention of States is found in Article 5 of the Constitution, and basically is a provision where if the states aren't happy with the federal government, they can go back and all get together, and they can have a convention, and they can basically alter the Constitution. I think it's a provision that's good to be in there, but I do not believe that our state leaders across this country have any type of a foundation on principles of liberty. I do not believe that they can go and have a convention of states and alter the Constitution and be any better than what we have. I think, in fact, it would just be compromised tremendously. And so that would be my concern. That's why I would frown upon that. The ability for them to actually do it is very, very small as well, because we're so divided in this country. I mean, we've got tremendous liberal states, we've got a few conservative states, and I just don't think if we got together right now that we would have any type of constitution left when they came out, to be honest with you.
There's 16 states already passed it, and that's
Yeah.
what they're pushing for. It's for a balanced budget amendment, term limits, and fiscal responsibility, and ending basically the tyranny of the federal government to going into any
Right.
state. That's what
There's some, people out there that have really pushed it. I've been, communication with many of them. I believe that the Constitution needs to be enforced, not changed. So, now your second question. So, Tom Luna is the head of the Republican Party here in Idaho, and when I announced, they about lost their minds. And I didn't even announce at that time. I just filled out a half-page form on the Secretary of State's office, and they got a hold of it, and then they lost their minds. And then they came out against me. He wrote a full-page letter, and he sent it to, I guess thousands and thousands of people across the state that are, registered in the Republican Party, vowing that he was not going to allow the resources of the Republican Party to be used by me. And the interesting thing is you know, I never planned on doing it anyway. I don't want their money. You know, there is a very deep, good old boys Republican establishment here in Idaho. And I plan on cracking that up and breaking it up. And I knew dang well it's deep in the Republican Party, and I wasn't going to get one bit of help from them. And so I thought it was almost comical that they were like little school children saying, "You're not going to get anything I have," you know. And I was like, I don't want it. That's the whole point. And so, but it is going to be something that's going to continue. They're going to be running ads. They're going to be our own Republican Party is going to be basically attacking me heavily, probably more than, well, by far more than the Democrats or the liberals will. Because I want to explain, because Idaho is on the verge of we're on the verge of going down a path that is a path of no return. A path that Oregon went on, that Washington went on, that California went on. I mean, all those were conservative, very productive, thriving states at one time. And now they are a complete mess. Nevada is going down that path. Colorado, New Mexico, Utah's on the verge of heading down that path. And all of this, I want you to understand that every one of these states, when they began to go down that path, were controlled by Republicans. Okay, every single one of them. Because there's a difference between a Republican and a conservative. They're not the same thing. And so Idaho has to decide, are we going to be Republican or are we going to be conservative? And I'm fighting for conservatism. I'm fighting for the right to worship how you want to worship.
Amen.
To trade how you want to trade. To travel freely. And to be able to live and be left alone. And that's what I'm fighting for. And I'm going to have to fight the liberals and the Republicans, because they do not believe in true liberty. The liberals or the Republicans. And you watch what happens. As I continue, and it's starting to happen already, as I continue to gain more momentum, because I don't know if you've seen the latest polls, but it has me ahead of even the governor and the lieutenant governor. So as I continue... Thank you. As I continue to gain momentum, you will see the liberals and the Republicans join forces against me, and know that that is a good thing. That means I'm doing the right things. But it also means that I need your support. I need you to not only back me up financially, I need your time as volunteers, and I also need your prayers and your support so that we can go through this fire. Because I believe that the majority of Idaho want to be conservative and not want to be establishment, good old boy Republican. So, all right, right here first.
You remind me so much of the campaign that Trump put out, and I'm wondering, have you reached out to his team for support?
I have very, very close connections, but I've never. And I want you to understand, like, you know where I was at when Trump was campaigning? I was sitting in solitary confinement in federal prison. I was there for 2 years. So I have no idea how Trump ran his campaign. I literally have no idea. I never watched one campaign talk. Never watched one, because I was in solitary confinement. And so I don't know how. I've heard that many times. I will say that I have business background. I believe that we're based upon true principles, and we are building a system, what I always call this campaign monster. We are building a system that is going to revolutionize the way people campaign. And we're getting close to be able to get it done and then turn it on. Because it's a communication system that no one's ever had before. And I know how to do this because of my experience in both my business with fleet maintenance software, and also we created People's Rights, which is a network of people all across the country. And so we've taken these tools and this knowledge and the things that we're doing, and and we're building this really, really amazing tool that's going to give us a huge advantage. So anyway, I appreciate the comment.
Can you elaborate on that tool?
Well, primarily it's a communication tool, but we have it's actually I don't want to. I don't want to yet. I don't want to yet. I think that's the first answer, our first question I've never fully answered.
Share with them what he told us last night of what Brad Little does to get in the federal.
Say that again?
Share with them what you told us
Oh,
last
yeah.
night of what Little does.
Okay, so change the topic. You will see the evidence of this tool that we're building. Some of you already have. Anyway, I'll just leave it at that. So the question was, or the request was to share with what Governor Little has done with funds and so forth. Is that correct?
Federal money that he got.
So Governor Little has received right around $18 billion from the federal government. Billion. Okay, many times over what the annual state budget is. And the interesting thing is who has the authority to decide where the state funds go and the budgets and so forth go? It's the legislature, right? And however, Governor Little has taken this money directly from the federal government into the office of the governor. Okay? And then under executive order, and it's actually Executive Order 2020-07, he has said that we're receiving all this money, so therefore we're going to put together a committee. And I, as governor, decide who's on the committee, and in the order it says this. And they serve at the pleasure of the governor.
Yes, that's what it says.
It does say that.
Yep.
And then they say basically, together with this committee and I, that I choose, and that serve at my pleasure, we get to decide where the funds are spent. And it comes out of some funds will be spent out of the office of the governor. Okay? Completely contrary to the laws and the Constitution of Idaho. The legislature is the one who's supposed to determine. Now, that is alarming alone, right? Just to hear that, to hear his terminology and what he's done. He's literally, through executive order, has put himself up as a dictator. And he's telling you and I whether we can come out of our homes or not, right? And then now he's been funded and he's found a way, or just taken away, where he gets arbitrarily to decide how those funds are spent. Contrary to our representative government, contrary to a constitutional republic. But so as alarming as that is, there's something more alarming, and that we should be aware of and be very concerned about. And that is, our legislature is so weak that they have said nothing about it. They should be screaming at the top of their lungs, saying, we are the ones that are supposed to decide where the funds. What are you doing, Governor Little? You do not have this authority. This is completely a usurpation of power, and they're not. They also the law in Idaho says that when a governor uses which is a martial law power, 46601, when he uses that as an emergency order, he only can have that in place for 30 days. Then it says that after 30 days, if it's something extreme and continuing, he can extend it for another 30 days. So the longest he can have it is in place is 60 days. And then it says that if he does not rescind the order within 60 days, the legislature shall, it said, which is what? That's an order from the people. The legislature shall convene on the 90th day, and that they have the power through joint resolution to end the order. And that's the law. It makes sense, right? So we don't end up in a dictatorship type form of government because some a tyrant decides that he can put us in executive order under martial law and keep us there indefinitely. Okay, which is exactly what's happened in Idaho, by the way. Our laws are good laws, and they set in place a way so that the legislature can take the power back from the governor if he tries to keep the people under an executive order for too long, more than 60 days. Now, so we began to communicate this with the legislature. We sent certified letters. We got, I think, 3 or 4 attorneys' offices, firms, to back that this is what the law meant. We sent it to the legislature. We communicated. We had people call. We put pressure on them. And what did they say to us? They said, well, we're going to fix it in the 2021 legislative session. We're going to end the order. We're going to fix it. We're going to get it all fixed. You have to be patient to them. And then we're saying, well, why would you wait till then? And they said, because we don't have permission from the governor to assemble. How much sense does that make? Here you got the executive, the governor who's over the executive branch, is put forth an executive order that is unlawful. And the law makes it so the legislative branch can assemble and end that order, but they're saying that they can't do it unless they get permission from the executive branch. That's how weak they are and how confused they are. Then we go to 2021 legislative session, and they start to look like they're going to end the order. We're like, okay, we're giving them backing, we're supporting them, you know. Okay, let's get this done. And then all of a sudden it stops. And we've come to find out that they were getting a little too close, and the governor calls them all together, and he says, look, if you end the order, then Idaho's not going to receive all this X amount of federal funds. And so guess what they did? They stopped it. They never even got it into the committees. They stopped it. They completely sold out the people of Idaho for federal funding under the direction of the governor. And so we still today are being held under executive order, which are under martial law authority. When you go home, remember this. Go Idaho Code 46-601. 46601. Go look that up. 46601. It will scare you, because what it does is it puts all the powers of government in the governor's hands. It even says that. And he's holding us in that right now. And the only reason why he hasn't gone further, because he tried to, remember his health order? He mandated that the Idaho stay in their homes, the stay-at-home order, right? You remember that? So he would have gone further and pushed harder. The reason why he didn't is because of why? What's that? That's right. We didn't comply. We refused to comply. We went and started living our lives because, again, proof that is the way that you protect and maintain rights. They can do all the legal and all the law and everything they want. They can try. But as long as people do not comply, it's the number one way you protect your rights. And we have to understand that. And that's why Idaho, there's situations just in Nevada, of course, Oregon, Washington, California, Montana's doing pretty good. Utah's not doing so great. But all around us are terrible things happening. And then let's go to Canada. That's a whole nother story, right? So we are a pocket right now, and we're only that way because we refuse to comply. And that's kept us safe, and that's why people are coming into Idaho, and which poses other challenges. Okay, so you had a question, and then we'll go here.
Well, I just want to roll back to the whole voting Republican thing and so I'm from Washington State, don't hold it against me. Came here seeking asylum.
We don't blame you.
But I made a mistake, and I went down to Canyon County elections, and I registered as a constitutionalist. as a constitutionalist or a libertarian, you cannot vote in a primary. So if you're gonna vote for him, make sure you change to Republican at the primary to get him in that seat.
That's correct.
If you don't, he won't be there.
Yeah. I think in 2008, the Republican Party changed the rules.
And we actually have these here tonight.
Registration
Anyone who
forms.
wants to change their party or register for the first time, they'll be right back here.
And you can go to my website, votebundy.com. There's a way to electronically register and change your party affiliation as well. You have to be a Republican in order to vote in the Republican primary. And that's why thousands of Democrats register as Republicans, so they can influence the Republican primary.
And they can do that the day of.
Yeah, so just be aware. Okay, now I got JJ. Did you have something to say?
If you shut that online, registration down when it's close to like
Yeah,
the
thank
local
you.
elections and stuff, so if it says you can't register, you have to go back in after or get paperwork.
Yeah, so, yeah, because they can't process them fast enough, so they like a week or 10 days before the election, you can no longer register online.
So don't wait.
So don't wait, yeah. So JJ.
You know, I got a question about the recent Afghanistan refugees that were coming into Boise and the Twin Falls area. What's your take on that?
Well, so first of all, the reason it's happening is because guess what? The state of Idaho took money and signed a memorandum of understanding that when the federal government wants to place refugees inside the state of Idaho, that the state of Idaho has to agree to it and has to accommodate it. So you see a pattern here, right? We see a pattern here. I believe that the one of the ways to fight that is through the 10th Amendment. I also believe that when it comes to immigration, there's three types of immigrants. And I'm not trying to stereotype, I'm just trying to get it down to where we can kind of understand. There's those that have come here for looking for a handout. There are those that come for criminal opportunity. And then there's those that come for liberty and opportunity. Properly, to work hard, right? Those are the three. And the first, it's very easy. If they come for a handout and they come to Idaho and there's no handouts, well, guess where they go? Yeah, California, Oregon, Washington, you can have them, right? We do not want those type of immigrants in Idaho. We don't want them, we don't need them, and they're very destructive to any type of society because all they want to do is take and they don't want to give back. So that's number one. Two, they come here for criminal opportunity. Well, we have a justice system when it's working right that should stop that. And there should be no exceptions to somebody. They shouldn't have immunity. They shouldn't have any protections. If they violate a person's right, the law should be used as it should properly be used to punish that person and send the message to the rest of the world, don't come to Idaho for criminal opportunity. That's the state you do not want to go to for criminal opportunity. And that should be for anybody, right? Because when I'm talking about immigrants, I might be talking about people fleeing here from Oregon. Or I might be talking about someone coming here from outside the country. It's the same thing, right? We're all people. Now the third type are those that want to come here, they want to work, they want to be good neighbors, they want to have opportunity, they want to thrive, but they want to do it through working. Well, guess what? We want those people here. We need those people here. But so the government has to stop handouts. It has to. Idaho needs to be different. We need to stop the handouts. I'm completely stop them. Then the motivation to come here for that reason is completely gone. They will not come. And then if we correct some pretty major problems in our criminal system, our penal systems and so forth, if we can correct them where they're actually being used to punish true crime, which is an infringement upon another person, not a violation of something the state says that has no victim. If we truly use the criminal justice system properly, then people from all over will just not come to Idaho and risk it. Why do you go prey upon the people of Idaho when you could go prey upon the people of Oregon? Right? Why do that? Why do you think it's dangerous just to walk down Portland or go downtown Portland? You literally take your own life into your own hands just going downtown Portland right now. Why? Because they have allowed crime to basically not be punished and sent a message that you can come down here and do whatever you want. You can go in as long as it's under $900. You can steal and do whatever you want from any store in town. And we're not going to punish it. Well, guess what? That's throwing a big old invitation flag up for every criminal in the country. And Idaho has to be different. And then we have to understand as a people that we need and want people that are coming here for opportunity. We need it. And not to categorize them just in all one immigration pile. There are good people. Almost every person in here has an ancestor or two that came to the United States to work and have opportunity. That is the American dream. You realize that? Nowhere in the world could you own property and it actually be yours. The only place you could do that is in the Americas. So the American dream was not to go get rich. The American dream was to go own a piece of property that was yours, that became your castle, that some lord or king didn't have a control over it and you were just their servant. That's the American dream. And that's what it should continue to be here in Idaho. And so thanks for that question. So I had a pattern here. Yeah, I think we're okay right here. Go ahead.
So a couple of things. One thing, I just want to encourage everybody, I was going to say it before JJ, but we need to all remember the primaries in November. Get out and vote for the school board election, all of these things, because you guys are fully aware, at least I hope you are, of the CRT issues in school, the curriculum that's going on, the SEL, social emotional learning, all of these things, they're trying to sneak it in, and if we don't stand up right now, I mean, this is our generation, the next generation, our future, right? If we don't stand up for our kids and get good people on those school boards that make the decisions about mask mandates and, shutting down schools and online learning and all these things, then we're gonna be in big trouble. So tell your neighbors, tell your family, get out there and vote in November for everything.
Write-ins for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And then I would like to ask you, so can you talk a little bit about what you want for Idaho homeowners? You were just mentioning that. I think your audience here tonight would really benefit from knowing about what you want for Idaho homeowners.
So there's a couple different things that I'm proposing. One is the elimination of property tax. And so then, if you eliminate property tax, what's the next question? Now, where are the funds going to come from that are to fund legitimate government? And I say it that way because I believe that there is a tremendous need for us to, downsize our agencies, to get them functioning properly, to get them to where they're more fiscally responsible and making sense in that way. But there are some legitimate purposes of government. County sheriffs, there's several legitimate purposes of government, and those purposes are based upon protecting our rights, correct? That is the purpose of the state, that's the purpose of the county, that's what they're for, to protect our rights. So how do we pay for those? If we end property tax, how do we pay for them? First of all, property tax is an immoral tax. It was a Marxist idea. That is something that we adopted here and has allowed it to basically get out of control. And it makes it so that a person never owns their home, right? And that the state can basically take their home if a person gets in a situation where they can't simply pay the property tax, even if they own their home and paid it off. And it's happening every day. mostly to the elderly, because they can't pay it any longer, and they end up forfeiting it to the state. You could lose your job, not pay, and lose your home. You could get disabled, not lose your home, and you could actually own your home. And in fact, in the 1930s, during the Great Depression, more people lost their home to the state than they did to the banks. And so that tells you how dangerous it can be to be in a situation where you don't fully have control of your home. And in fact, what was there's a Marxist quote, Karl Marx quote. Everybody know who Karl Marx is, right? He's basically the founder and the thinker and the writer behind communism, right? He wrote the Communist Manifesto. And he says this, he goes, communism can be summed up into one sentence: abolition of private property. Okay? And so when and that's what it is, where nobody owns anything. Okay? The abolition of private property. And property tax was certainly part of that. And in fact, they wanted and planned on taking it much further. We've justified it by saying that it is a legitimate need to fund government. The only moral, the solution is with a consumption tax. The solution is with a consumption tax is the only moral way to tax it. And basically, consumption tax is like a sales tax. Well, a sales tax is a consumption tax. So I'm going to give you, if you'll bear with me, I'll try to get through it real quick. Let's take a $400,000 home, because the average home in Idaho, as of a couple months ago, is $403,000. The average home in the Treasure Valley is $540,000. It's gone up 73% in the last 5 years. And of course, property tax goes with the value of the home, right? So if you take a $400,000 home, the average person is paying about $2,000 to $3,000 a year in property tax, depending for a $400,000 home. That's what it would be. So you calculate that for 30 years, because that's about the length of a mortgage, and I'm going to explain that later. And you end up with $60,000 to $90,000 in a 30-year period going to the state to fund, we want to say, legitimate government purposes, right? Well, now let's say we get rid of property tax, so that $60,000 to $90,000 is gone, at least in that way. We need to replace it so that legitimate government purposes can function, right? And I'm proposing with a consumption tax. And the way that would look would be like a 4% that would be taxed at the time the home was sold. Okay, so if I buy a home, a $400,000 home, if it's 5%, that would be $20,000, and I could pay it then, or I could lump it into the mortgage and pay it over a 30-year period of time. Now you might say, well, that's a far cry from $60,000 to $90,000. But the thing is, the average home in Idaho sells 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period. So that would actually make it so that the state would receive $60,000 to $120,000 of revenue for the legitimate purposes of government under a consumption tax. But what's the difference? Yeah, once you've paid off the mortgage or paid off the tax, you own your home. And so there is no negative to it. The only negative to it, and I kind of expose it a little bit, the only negative would be the interest that you would pay on the $20,000 if you decided to roll it into your mortgage. That's the only negative. Besides that, it's in your mortgage, you're already paying it anyway, you're paying, it's about the same amount you would be paying, but the difference is when you pay it off, pay the mortgage off, when you own your home, there would be no more tax on it. And it would protect your right to private property. So that's what I'm proposing. So, the second part of your question is, and I realize I'm kind of getting long-winded on some of these, and I apologize, but I'm trying to explain myself so you understand me. We have an affordable housing crisis problem in this state. It's a real problem. My oldest daughter, she's 19, she married her high school sweetheart, he's 19. And yeah, they're going to college right now, but how in the world are they ever going to pay a mortgage that's $3,500 just to get in an average size home in Idaho? Or even, or rent, right? I mean, basically we've made it so that we can't afford to, anybody who doesn't have a home cannot afford to get a home. And so it's a real problem. It's a real problem for the future of Idaho. And the solution is actually hard to do, but very simple, because it's a supply and demand problem. And we have the federal government controlling 63% of our land here in Idaho. 63% of our land is being held under control of the federal government. And it is extremely important that we get it back, and I'm going to emphasize that. Because where are we building right now? On our farmland, on our agricultural land. What's the number one industry in Idaho? It's agriculture. We are destroying our number one industry right now in Idaho simply because the federal government will not allow us to build upon the hills that would be perfect places to build homes all around our towns. They won't allow us to develop it. And why? Well, we can go into the reasons why, really, but I won't go too much. But it is absolutely unconstitutional for them to do that. And I could go into that, but basically Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the Constitution says that the federal government shall dispose of the land. What does that mean? That means that they are supposed to and have a duty, an order by the people, that when the people need it and when the people are ready for it, that they are supposed to dispose of it to the people. Now, there's a lot of legal argument that at statehood, that is a disposal. That is the federal government getting it out of their hands and giving it to the people as a state, and therefore, at that moment, it no longer is under the jurisdiction of the federal government. And I believe that that legal argument is correct. And one of the things that I plan on doing, and the mechanisms I will use, I in time will explain them better, but I plan on fighting that battle. Plan on identifying the lands in Idaho that we want to use for recreation, hunting, what we call multiple use lands, and protecting them for that purpose, and protecting the rights of the people to use those lands in those ways. And then the lands around these towns and these cities that are primed for development, that we make them available to the people as well through many different ways or at least one way that we'll decide of how the best to dispose of it. We make that available to the people, and then we continue to use our agricultural land, and that has blessed Idaho since the very beginning of its establishment. And we protect all three areas and use them appropriately. And that's what I'm proposing to help us, because ultimately what it comes down to, the affordable housing crisis right now is a supply and demand issue. And we need to increase the supply. We would be naive to think, well, we're just going to stop people from moving to Idaho. I'm sorry, that's just not going to happen. Some of us would love it, where people just wouldn't move in here. The reality is they're going to come because they're going to come for freedom. And if we don't solve this problem now, we're going to end up with our cities growing up, and we know what happens there. We get the Hunger Games syndrome, where you got a capital city, you got all the districts out here, and they're just feeding the capital city, and the capital city is just controlling everything. And that's what we're going to end up with if we do not grow out, and we allow ourselves to grow up, and also develop, and we lose our farmlands because we developed them. Why? Because we need housing, we have to have housing. So that's my very long answer again, but great question.
Not that Bill Gates is buying a lot of property and not letting anybody grow things on their land or even to build on their land.
I've heard that. I haven't heard really necessarily Bill Gates. I know that there's a development company or actually more of a
Blackwater.
rental, Blackwater. I've heard that multiple times where they're purchasing, buying up homes, buying up apartment buildings, and then their rental contracts are very stringent, like you can have guns, you can't, grow certain things. I have heard that, but that's, for me, it's just all hearsay. I haven't done my research,
I
so.
talked to the guy that works at Simplot, and he says Simplot got money not to grow things this year.
Oh, they get that every year. I mean,
A lot.
I don't agree with it, but there are subsidies that the government gives farmers, and sometimes it's really detrimental. They actually pay the farmers not to grow, and it's craziness, but rather than letting the free market go, so. Right here.
Yes, sir, thank you. So, one question I'd like to ask that I think is probably near and dear to the hearts of probably everybody in this room, as well as many people in Idaho, is the attack on our Second Amendment freedoms. And there's constant bills being introduced into our federal government to try to limit and or take away our Second Amendment freedom. So what I am asking of you is, if you became governor and there was a direct attack where it was mandated that federal agents would come into our state and start collecting and rounding up firearms, what would your plan of response be to that, considering that you would be controlling the National Guard as well as the militias that you could call up, which are comprised of basically all 18 to 55-year-old males in the state?
Yeah, good question. So, and I think this question can be spread out through all rights. You asked it about our right to defend ourselves, which is where the Second Amendment, because our rights don't come from the Constitution, right? The Constitution just protects our rights, and God has given us a right to defend ourselves. And our founders understood very clearly that if we don't have the tools to defend ourselves with, that we just become subject. And in fact, the Second Amendment, there's two parts to the Second Amendment. Because everybody thinks, well, the Second Amendment is just the right to bear arms, right? There's a beginning part to the Second Amendment, and it's I got to get it started here in my head. A well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So let's break that down. A well-regulated militia, and militia, as he said, by U.S. code, there's the organized and unorganized militia, and a militia is able-bodied man between the ages of 18 and what was it? Whatever.
I think in the state of Idaho it's 55.
55, 18. So that is the militia. So don't get scared of that word. They've tried to scare us about that word. It is just people that are armed between the ages of 18 and 55, and they're able-bodied. That's what the militia is. Okay? And our founders said in the Second Amendment, and they made it law, but they said a well-regulated militia being necessary for the security of a free state. So in order for the people to be free, they have to have an armed body of people to make sure that they stay free. Right? And it's protected. So ultimately, the responsibility to defend ourselves ultimately lies upon us. But we have created states to do that. And one of the things that is very clear, the 10th Amendment, is that any power not given to the federal government in the Constitution belongs to the state or to the people. And so anytime the federal government would come into the state as governor, I would make sure that they are understood very clear that we are going to defend ourselves. Now, especially when it comes to taking our guns, messing with our children, our right to worship, right? Those things. Now, how would I do that? Well, one, I would empower our sheriffs. I would communicate, I would help them understand that they have the power in their counties to deputize as many people as they need for the defense of the people in that county. I would definitely empower the sheriffs. And we have to understand that the sheriffs are the head executive officer in the county. And even by federal code, they're supposed to get permission from the sheriffs before they try to enforce law inside the county. Why? Because they are the chief executive law enforcement officer in the county. And the people have delegated the policing and arresting power to the sheriff. And if the sheriff gets out of hand, what can the people do?
Recall.
They can recall them. They can vote somebody else in. And anyway, so that's kind of my roundabout. Did I answer your question? I mean, there are certain other resources that the governor has, but just overall, and then we're gonna have to wrap this up because we're getting probably at the time where we need to end it. But overall, the duty of the responsibility or the purpose of the state, purpose is probably the best way, is to do what? The purpose of the state is to protect the rights of the people. It's not to give welfare. It's not to hand out tickets all over. It's not to get power and enrich themselves. It is the purpose of the government or of the state is to protect the people, the rights of the people. And it's not a fair fight when the federal government comes down upon an individual inside the state. It's not a fair fight when they send their officers and they kick in the doors, or they legally attack them, or they try to take their property. It's not a fair fight. It was designed so that when the federal government came to do that, the state would put its resources and say, no, you will not do this. It was designed that way to make sure that there's a proper check and balance upon the federal government. And all I will be doing will make sure that the state's resources are used to protect the people. And I look at it like, you have, let's say, a child, and you have a pedophile, and then you have the parent, right? And I don't want to make you think that the state is some type of parent. That's not what I'm trying to do. But what if because in our case what happened was we were pleading with the state to defend us because we knew they should. And the state was saying, well, we're going to take a neutral position. That's what they said. Well, it's not a neutral position when you allow the federal government to attack a family. It's not a neutral position when you allow an adult pedophile to attack a child, right? What is the duty of the parent to do? To stand in front and do all you can to protect that child, even at the cost of your own life. And that's what the state and the role of the state should be. And we, my friends, are going to need this. We need the state to stand up for us. We need the state to start checking and balancing these, the federal government and even the world if it comes down upon us. Because Idaho needs to be different. We need to be able to live free, to worship, to trade, to travel. And the state should protect that right. And so ultimately, just wrapping this up, when you're looking for someone who's going to head the state of Idaho, you need to look at someone who understands the principles of liberty and understands the purpose of the state. And not only that, it's not good enough that they just understand. You need to find and choose someone who is going to actually do it. Who actually is going to stand between you and any other criminal, whether street criminal or government criminal, stand between you and that person or that entity to protect your rights. And so with that being said, I'm going to wrap up and ask you to look and see if I've done that in my past. Yes, one more, I guess.
This young gentleman asked me a question that I don't know the answer to.
Okay.
And I feel bad about it. He asked me, how many amendments are there to the Constitution?
I think there's 27, but I can tell you real quick. It's a good question, but I think there's 27. Could be wrong. There are Roman numerals. There are 27. 27 amendments.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Oh, right here. have looked at some of them, but I don't know, I haven't researched them enough to give you my opinion about them. And I will say that, you know, and an attorney general, especially as an elected position, is very important because we have a lot of cleaning up to do there. And then, of course, Secretary of State is over our elections and so forth. So I can't tell you for sure. I have met several of them, and I have not done my research enough to be able to give you my opinion on who would be good in those positions.
Yeah, and that's fair.
So-
I just think, you know, as you move to the primary, and if you're selected to move on, it would be good for the folks that support you to know what other roles or
Absolutely.
roles are around you.
We will, that, absolutely correct, and we will, as time goes on, we will basically ask candidates to back the Keep Idaho plan. And I encourage you to go to votebuddy.com and look at that plan and see if you can back it. And hopefully to unite with people, other candidates, so that we can all get behind this Keep Idaho plan and to make that what our you know, candidacy and our campaign is about. So we've got to wrap this up.
Yeah, I gotta ask you just because of things that I've been seeing.
Okay.
I've noticed our governor uses the state police as his own policing. That's something that's really getting out of hand. And so they're violating a lot of rights of the people because he says to do it. How's that gonna be correct?
Well, so that is very true, and the Idaho State Police has basically become the governor's own little personal army. I hate to say it. It's very hard for me to look at the function of the Idaho State Police and to justify really even the Idaho State Police even being there. So my really clear answer, the simple answer is I plan on dissolving the Idaho State Police into the sheriff's departments. And okay. Oh, I got another one here.
Alright, so if you were to dissolve that department, would there be a way to lower that tax as far as the consumption tax?
Absolutely. And that's, yeah, thank you, because I mean, that's the whole goal here, right? That we, you know, dissolve or diminish the agencies that don't need to be there, that many of them are actually infringing upon the rights of the people and do nothing to protect them. And we lower the downsize government. We become more responsible and clean up the agencies that we do legitimately need. And of course, that should reflect upon the taxes of the people of Idaho. And that absolutely is something when I leave office that I hope that we have accomplished that and that the burden upon the people of Idaho is much, much less than it is right now. And with that being said, I'm going to wrap this up real quick and I'm going to say I could literally go into the office of governor and never legislate even one law. I could never, and not even work with the legislature, although I plan on, and I believe that I have full confidence to do that. They need some tremendous leadership there. But I could just work on diminishing the power and size and influence and cost of the executive branch under the governor for 4 years or 8 years and never pass one law, never open my door to one legislator, I should say, and do the people of Idaho a tremendous amount of good. And so understand that, because some people are like, well, wait a minute, you know, how are you going to work with the legislature and so forth? And I do believe that there has to be a tremendous amount of things that need to be or should be done there. But the executive branch, the bureaucrats, the full-time employees of the state that are mostly in the executive branch are the ones that are controlling the state and actually mostly infringing upon the rights of the people. And so those are the ones that need to be put in control, and they're directly under the authority of the governor, which is why I'm running for this position and not something else. So understand that. With that being said, I need to turn the time over to Wendy, and she has a few things to say, and I want to thank you for your patience and all your questions, and I really appreciate it. I think this has been a great discussion here. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about me. I won't be long, I promise. I'm pretty old. I have a home in Utah, and I have a big family. Lots of kids, lots of grandkids and great-grandkids. And Ammon and I have got to know each other since he was imprisoned. I got to know his family first at the courthouse there. And then when the guys got out, I got to know them a little bit. And I got active in his People's Rights Network when he started that, and was a state assistant in Utah. And we got to know each other a little better there. And Ammon called me up and he said, I guess you heard I filed to run for governor. And I said, yeah, Ammon, everybody's heard that. The Secretary of State, I think, put that out, to everybody. But anyway, he said, well, I have something to ask you. And he asked me to be his campaign manager. Sorry, I get emotional. And he didn't really know my situation. I don't think he knew that I was widowed and alone and on a fixed income. But so I said yes. I pretty much decided and promised myself and my Heavenly Father, when I got to know this family, that I would do anything they asked me to do, because they will do anything to preserve liberty and freedom for all of us. And I want that preserved. I want that preserved for my family, and I think you people here tonight want that too. Just hold on, I've got some. I'm not going to get it. Anyway, the way that we can do that is to elect this man as our governor. I think this is the last chance to keep Idaho, which has been a bastion of security and freedom for people. That's why people are moving here. We hear it every day from people that have just moved here in the last few months. And I just came up in June. I left my home and my family, and here I am. And not only am I giving my time, I donate monthly. And we're going to ask you to do that too. How many of you want freedom and liberty for yourselves and your children and grandchildren? How many of you want that? How many of you got this little QR code tonight? Have you picked that up? You can go on there and subscribe and receive emails from Ammon. You can respond with questions and he will answer you directly. You can go on there and donate. If you sign up to donate monthly, $20 or more, we have a little gift kit for you. I have signed up to do that. I don't have a gift kit, but I did sign up to do that on my limited income. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Drink a little less coffee or beer or whatever you drink extra than water. Whatever. Smoke less packs of cigarettes in a month. Something. You can do it. We need to do it, and we're asking you to do that. So who's going to do that? Who's going to sign up to donate to Ammon's campaign in some way, volunteer, financial? We need your help. Thank you. And you can do that tonight. Alicia and I both have cool little apps on our phone where we can subscribe you, we can take donations, and we look forward to working with you and getting to know you and doing that. Thanks, John.
I lost my home in June to the big storm that was here with my family. We lived in Ola off the grid, and we lived in a big motorhome, and it completely wiped it out, took the roof off and everything. Ammon found out about it. The next day we had his trailer, which I still have because I just replaced mine finally. He says, you can keep it as long as you want. And if you need money, you need anything, I'm there for you. This man is not only running for governor, but he is a loving person who cares about all of us. He showed me that with me and my family. Because of him, we weren't homeless. We lost everything during this COVID thing. And that's why we live where we live. And God bless you for what you do and your family. talk to you so much. Hopefully, when they get it there, next 2 weeks, we hope that everything goes right. We're going to our communication.
Yeah, and I didn't understand that when I'm like, why doesn't she get a hold of me?
Yeah,
I am seriously all that stuff. We got 9 grand here. If I don't do something now, someday I will have.
Sir, will you help me take this off? Will you help me take this off? I have no clue on how to take this
Famous
off.
quote from Sir Isaac Newton.
Go with it.
For evil to triumph in the world is one
Thank you, sir. If I may.
Thank you, Judy. We offer everything at cost, because in the hopes that people will be generous and donate. So rather than charge an arm and a leg for everything like I've been told the other campaigns are doing, we just offer it at a cost.